Good evening, everyone. Be seated, thank you. Oh, I need to go home now. Welcome everyone to the meeting. Councillors, officers, public and press, anyone who may be viewing the meeting online, possibly one of my children. Councillors to be seated in the seats allocated to them for voting purposes, and can I please remind councillors to turn their microphones on while speaking and to turn them off again once finished. Otherwise you will not be heard on the broadcast. Apologies for absence. Do we have any official apologies for absence? No? Brilliant. Okay, in that case, on to agenda item 1, declarations of interest. So, councillors need to declare their interest in the items on the agenda. Can I remind councillors that you should declare the type of interest you have, the agenda item and reference in question, the reason why you have an interest. So I've been made aware that there are likely to be a number of interests declared. So I suggest that we do this initially by agenda item. So we have item 3, the rent review. Councillor Brooks.
As Chair of the Housing Company, declare a personal interest in item 3.
Thank you.
As a non-exec of the Housing Company, similar to Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Councillor Hobson. And Councillor Sloman.
Similarly to Councillor Brooks and Councillor Hobson, I declare a personal interest in item 3 by virtue of lead.
Thank you. So then we have agenda item 4, the general revenue budget declarations. Oh, right. We will start here. Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Mayor. Item 4, as you've just said, I'm a member of the Combined Fire Authority, so that's my personal interest.
Thank you. Who was next? We're going to go up. Councillor Bowden.
Can I declare a personal interest on item 4 on the concessionary fare scheme as a non-executive director of Blackpool Transport Services Limited, and a prejudicial interest on, again on item 4, on the savings in relation to Blackpool Transport Services.
Thank you. Councillor Hoyle.
Yes, similarly, I'd like to declare a prejudicial interest, if I may, in the fact that I'm the chair of the Blackpool Waste Services.
Thank you. And who did? It's getting very good. Councillor Hobson.
Thank you. Yeah, a prejudicial interest in item 4 as I'm a non-exec of the Housing Company.
Thank you. Councillor Farrell.
Thank you, Mayor. Prejudicial interest in agenda item 4 as a non-exec director of Beckle.
Councillor Brooks.
Prejudicial interest item 4 as Chair of the Housing Companies.
Thank you. Councillor Hugo.
Personal interest in item 4 as I'm a member of the Combined Fire Authority, so in relation to the fire precept.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Item 4, prejudicial interest as a non-executive director of Bockle.
Fabulous. Is that everyone on that side? Oh. Councillor Benson.
Personal interest in item appendix 4B, proposed pay review with the Blackpool Transport Services, as my husband is employed Blackpool Transport, and a DPI interest in relation to the tram depot rent identified as scheduled on item appendix 4B.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Similarly to Councillor Benson, personal interest in concessionary fares and a potential DPI in relation to the tram depot rent, as my partner works at BTS.
Thank you. Did I say Councillor Jones?
I'd like to declare a prejudicial interest in item 4 as a non-executive director of Envico.
Thank you. Councillor Bamborough.
Item 4, prejudicial interest, as I am a member of the Board of Blackpool Transport.
Thank you. Is that everyone on this side? In that case, we'll move across here.
Councillor Bamber's also a personal interest in the concessionary fares.
Okay. Would it be right that you have a personal interest in concessionary fares as well?
That as well, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. Okay, so we'll go along the Councillor Baker first.
Thank you.
Yes, I'd like to declare a personal interest in item 4 as a member of the Combined Fire Authority and the precept.
Thank you. Anyone else on the front there? Yeah, Councillor Mitchell.
I'd like to declare an interest, prejudicial interest in item 4 as a non-executive director of Bockle.
Thank you. And then are we going to the back row? Councillor Wilshaw.
Prejudicial interest on item 4 as I'm a non-exec of Blackpool Waste.
Councillor Walsh.
Can I declare a prejudicial interest in agenda item 4 as a non-executive director of Beckle?
And Councillor Sloman.
Prejudicial interest in item 4 on the basis of being a non-exec director of the housing company.
Thank you very much. Okay, is that everyone? Fabulous, thank you. So moving on, minutes of the last of the meeting held on the 31st of January. Do councillors agree the minutes of the meeting held as a true and correct record? Agreed? Agreed. Anyone disagree? No. So before we move into business, I just have a very short announcement. Just to congratulate Councillor Portia Webb and her husband, Chris Webb, on the birth of their beautiful looking son. I can't wait to meet Killian Douglas Webb on, I'm trying to remember what day it was. Sunday. Nice healthy weight and he looks gorgeous. So congratulations, Portia, if you should be watching. Not that you'll have time for that. We've not heard anything about Councillor Smith yet, have we? No. Okay. Okay. So moving on, we've got the first item, proposed rent review, and I do believe that's over to Councillor Smith to move the recommendation on behalf of the executive.
Okay. Yeah. Good evening. Thank you for that. Proposal for the rent review 2020-24-25. The proposal is to increase the housing rent for social housing by 7.7% as recommended by central government CPI of 6.7 plus 1%. We'll just add a few notes to context what the report says. I've drawn some information from the report and added a bit myself to it as well. The average rent charge in Blackpool for 23-24 was 77 and 26 pence, and affordable properties £102.98. I did a bit of a comparison check today while I was doing my notes. I was looking at sort of comparison between the private rented sector and the quality social housing we got. I was shocked by the consideration, to be honest, considering the proposal rent increase social housing would pay an average of £408 per calendar month on a 3-bed social council house. But if you went into the private sector, a 3-bed terrace house, the cheapest I could find at Rightmove was £675. The next one was £700 per calendar month. So that's working out you'd pay 40% less than you would do in the private sector on a terrace house. But if you went to a semi-detached house, saying that, the cheapest I saw on the Rightmove today was 850 quid. So it's actually less than 50% of the private sector rents paid. I assume many tenants of private rented houses would love to have a quality council social housing on those rents they repay in there compared to what they're paying in the private sector. Regarding the proposed rent review, currently we have 83% of tenants are in receipt of benefits social direct support for housing, even with the increase in below of the coastal local housing allowance. So 80% of people would be in benefit of some receipt towards paying their housing rent. Blackpool has some of the lowest social rents in the country, 22% below the national average paying for social housing, so we're one of the lowest in the country. The best of having a healthy revenue account, HRH, we can invest in housing stock for Blackpool. This year we've almost completed the build, we opened I think about April time, for the new 133 new houses on Grange Park, ranging from 1-bed to I believe 5-bed properties. 6-bed, is it right? Sorry, I should apologise there. Mayor. If you're not, I've been around this site, I've looked at some of these properties. All I can say is they're fantastic, really lovely, good housing. If you've not seen them, I would recommend you trying to arrange a tour and a visit of these properties because they're outstanding, high quality for the tenants of Blackpool. Also, having a good, strong housing revenue account is that we plan to support the energy efficiency climate emergency going forward by investing 500,000, that's £500,000, to make sure all properties of social housing, the minimum APC of a C or higher, or B or A, not lower than that. Also, we looked at some figures in the report. If we sort of try to decarbonise all the properties in the social housing, unfortunately, we ain't got the money to do it, but the estimate based on current figures would be between 80 and 90 million. So we're doing our bit, and as we receive an additional sort of funding grants from central government, we would work towards increasing the decarbonation of these properties. Also, we've taken into consideration that, so we say 7.7, which is, nobody wants to increase any rent or any cost to anybody in the town. But I mean, we talk about inflation and talk about the cost of the average living wage and the benefits, which has gone up in line with by 10%. So 7.7 actually falls below the increase in central government, what everybody's getting, increase in pay increase. Okay, so I look forward to the comments.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Williams?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm happy to second and reserve the right to reply. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other councillors to speak? Councillor Galley.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate Councillor Smith's attention to the detail that he supplied us with, Mayor, but there was something that was really missing in the data that he provided both tonight and in the report. And that concerns, who are this 17%? Where is the equality analysis on the 17% that are going to pay this increase? I've seen over the years the Labour members use the same reason every time when they put these rents up, but the difference this time is this is the biggest rent increase I've seen you ever deliver in my 13 years as a councillor. What does this amount of money work out to as a percentage? Because percentages are just what they are. They're comforting, they're soft, but there is a real figure in here. It's £6 a week, Mayor. So that's £6 a week times 4 times 12 is actually a big number for somebody who may just be about getting by. These are not going to be rich people. And what I feel is really lacking in here is who are they? What support will they have? What I sense as well, Mayor, is there's another trend that's playing itself out. Because last year it wasn't 17%, it was 19% who were affected. And I think more and more people are being pushed into benefits, not away from them, which goes against directly with some of our own council priorities about creating resilience within our residents, maximising economic growth. I feel incredibly concerned about what we're doing to these people. But there's another fact that was omitted as well by Councillor Smith, Mayor. Whilst we talk about rents around the UK, something else that plays itself out in Blackpool is the fact that we have some of the lowest wages in the country here. Our median wage, Mayor, is 21,000. It gets smaller when we look at part-time wages, which often some of these people I suspect will be on. I suspect they will be female. I suspect they will be cleaners. I suspect they will be carers. They will be directly affected by this. And for that reason, this side of the chamber will absolutely not will support it, especially when we know that the basis of this is they're 300,000 over their reserve that they need to have, which is £1 million. And then for any resident that lives in Ankersholme, King Craig area or Horside parts of this estate, they'll be very comforted to know that their increase is going to support developments elsewhere in the town. There is nothing in there for them that can be delivered in here. And I hear that firsthand, having got 2 areas in my own ward. So out of respect, we absolutely cannot support this. And we would very much like this to be a recorded vote item if we could, Mayor.
It will be anyway, Councillor Galley, yes. Anyone else to speak? Councillor Blanchard name there. Sorry about that, Councillor Brooks.
I think.
Yeah, it's because there's so many of you.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'm glad Paul's talked about, sorry, Councillor Galley's talked about the detail. But what he's forgot to mention is that the detail of this report is about maintaining the housing revenue account for future. It's not about this year, it's about the next 30 years. Just for the record, BCH look after approximately 4,700 properties. All those properties offer a secure long-term tenancy and help to build sustainable communities for support. If you're talking about rent levels, we are the 5th lowest in the country, which reflects the people that we're looking after. It's actually 34% below the highest in the Northwest, all for the benefit of our communities. Sadly, our social housing numbers are only about 9% of the overall property availability locally for rent. The regional average is 16 or 17%. So basically, every other area nearby has got twice the number of social houses that we have. Why is that important? Because we need to increase that stock level, because that drives the rental market. It means that private sector landlords can't rip people off with the poor conditions that they get away with currently. That's because of the lack of competition. We need to deliver a sound HRA over time if we're going to deliver the ambition to get up to the regional average of social housing for rent. The proposed increase of rent 7.7% reflects that. Just to complement the discussion, it's not just about this year, it's about the next 30 years, and it's also about the things that the HRA and a sustainable HRA helps us to deliver, to help create sustainable communities. I don't want to teach councillors to suck eggs, that I've heard this argument before, but the HRA supports an awful lot of things other than just building council houses. It talks about the More Positive Together scheme, which is designed to help those furthest from education or training into the labour market or the education market. Over 1,000 people have been benefited from that scheme, 250 into work, 200 into education or training. The Positive Transition Service is supported, where it helps care leavers into accommodation. And the latest example of how the benefit we can deliver for the community is the offer of furnished tenancies. We talk about the homeless people, we talk about people with no money. BCH have just started a pilot scheme to allow people to access furnished tenancies, so that instead of arriving in a property that's empty and sitting there with nothing to support them, no carpets or blinds at the window, they could actually rent white goods, they can rent furniture, and they can have a home to sustain and maintain a community. So all those things are supported by the HRA. If we don't vote for this, we risk in 25, 30 years' time, the HRA falling over, and we can deliver none of that ambition, and we won't help our residents at all.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Any further speakers? No? In that case, Councillor Smith, right to reply.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the questions. Thank you, Councillor Galley, for your question there. Yes, I mean, no one wants to put any increased charge on anybody in Blackpool, anybody in life, really. But as we know, the rise in increasing inflation has been 10% for the last 2 years, which is compound effect as well. So with an increase of 7.7, actually is below the rate of inflation. And also, I was going to say, the rent, as I said before, in there is a very affordable rent compared to the private renter sector. And we have, being sort of the landlord of choice, we look after the tenants with long-term secure tenancy. That they're not sort of threatened to be the property sold and asked to move on to another property. I know people have moved 4, 5, 6, 7 times over a number of years on the private. So tenants now have a long-term stability on where they want to live. So for that reason, I don't your comments I don't sort of take them a note, but I don't think they're valid. You know, I think we need to support the future of the HA, as Councillor Brooks has said. We need to invest in the future, invest in the property, invest in the housing stock. The HRA has helped fund the new 133 quality homes on Grange Park, which has benefited another 130 people, 33 people got new homes to live in, you know. So we need to invest for now and need to invest for the future. Also, as I said before, invest in trying to reduce the energy efficiency of these properties as well going forwards. So, but thank you, and thank you for comments, Councillor Brooks, on what you said.
Okay, so we need 5 people to indicate if they'd like a recorded vote. I think we've got that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a recorded vote on the motion in the name of Councillor Mark Smith. Please could members indicate their answer with either yes, no or abstain. Councillor Baker? No. Councillor Bamborough? Yes. Councillor Benson? Yes. Councillor Boughton? Yes. Councillor Neil Brooks. Yes. Councillor Pam Brooks. Yes. Councillor Sean Brooks.
Yes.
Councillor Burdess.
Yes.
Councillor Cartmel.
Yes.
Councillor Cooper. No. Councillor Critchley. Yes. Councillor Ellison. No. Councillor Farrell.
Yes.
Councillor Flanagan. Yes. Councillor Galley. No. Councillor Hobson.
Yes.
Councillor Hoyle.
Yes.
Councillor Hugo.
Yes.
Councillor Humphreys.
Yes.
Councillor Hunter.
Yes.
Councillor Jackson.
Yes.
Councillor Jones.
Yes.
Councillor Marshall.
Yes.
Councillor Carl Mitchell.
No.
Councillor Diane Mitchell. No. Councillor Roberts.
No.
Councillor Rowe.
Yes.
Councillor Danny Scott.
No.
Councillor Michelle Scott. No. Councillor Sloman.
Abstain.
Councillor Mark Smith.
Yes.
Councillor Taylor. Councillor Thomas.
Yes.
Councillor Walsh. No. Councillor Warren.
No.
Councillor Williams.
Yes.
Councillor Wilshaw.
No.
Mayor.
Yes.
Mayor, members have voted as follows: 25 for the motion, 12 against, 1 abstention.
Okay, in that case, the motion is carried. Thank you. So moving on, agenda item 4, the General Fund Revenue Budget, Council Tax and Dedicated School Grant for 24-25. There is a separate order of proceedings for this, and if anyone does have it in a paper form, it's on page 5 that we start. So this is now over to Councillor Williams. Over to you, Councillor Williams. We've got people that need to leave, though, haven't we? Sorry. Go that way. It's just, sorry, can we be, yeah. Not everyone, otherwise I'll be here on my own. Just the housing company. Yeah, that's why I said page 5. Are you going to just make sure? I know. Just whip through. Okay. Right, is everyone left that needs to leave? Yeah. Yes. In that case, over to you, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. So, this is proposed budget savings in relation to housing company recharges and review of company overheads for Blackpool Housing Company Limited, Blackpool Coastal Housing Limited. It's actually on page 125 of the agenda. So I move to agree a budget saving of £422,000 based on recharges and a review of company overheads for Blackpool Coastal Housing Limited and Blackpool Housing Company Limited, reference Appendix 4B. Okay.
Seconder? Yeah. Councillor Taylor. Any other speakers on this item? Councillor Galley.
Thank you, Mayor. I always said, and I made it a point of honour, that whatever happened, if we were going to vote no on something, I would explain why. And this is one of those occasions where that absolutely must be honoured. It was hard to work out what the why should be, though, Mayor, owing to the general lack of information as to what that impact and consequence would be. But bearing in mind, we've just had a conversation as regards the concern that some of our members have around the HRA account, which is absolutely right. They should have that concern. Ultimately, though, I suspect that any debts and any ultimate concerns about these organisations will ultimately have to be paid for by the people of the town, therefore, i.e. in this case, the tenants. We absolutely will not be supporting that saving.
Thank you, Councillor Galley. Any further speakers? No? Councillor Williams, you do have the right to reply.
Just very briefly, Mayor, just to say that obviously these have been fully worked out, the companies consulted with, and we would not take any action, particularly in light of having the previous item to ensure the future of the HRA and the housing company to enable us to deliver those new essential housing for our people. That we're very proud of both companies and would never put either company into any kind of issue of difficulty. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. In that case, this does have to be a recorded vote. No, it needs to be.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a recorded vote on the motion in the name of Councillor Lynn Williams. Please could members indicate their answer with yes, no or abstain. Councillor Baker? No. Councillor Bamborough? Yes. Councillor Benson? Yes. Councillor Boughton? Yes. Councillor Pam Brooks? Yes. Councillor Sean Brooks?
Yes.
Councillor Badess?
Yes.
Councillor Cartmel?
Yes.
Councillor Cooper? No. Councillor Critchley? Yes. Councillor Ellison? No. Councillor Farrell?
Yes.
Councillor Flanagan?
Yes.
Councillor Gully? No. Councillor Hoyle?
Yes.
Councillor Hugo?
Yes.
Councillor Humphreys?
Yes.
Councillor Hunter?
Yes.
Councillor Jackson?
Yes.
Councillor Jones?
Yes.
Councillor Marshall?
Yes.
Councillor Carl Mitchell?
No.
Councillor Diane Mitchell? No. Councillor Roberts?
No.
Councillor Rowe?
Yes.
Councillor Danny Scott?
No.
Councillor Michelle Scott? Councillor Mark Smith?
Yes.
Councillor Taylor?
Yeah.
Councillor Thomas?
Yes.
Councillor Walsh?
No.
Councillor Warren?
No.
Councillor Williams?
Yes.
Councillor Wilshaw?
No.
Mayor?
Yes.
Members have voted as follows: 23 for the motion, 12 against.
So that motion is carried. Thank you. So we're moving on, and I'm just having a look at the list of people.
Just need to get the members.
Yeah, I was trying to make it
All right,
easier by
sorry.
getting other people to move as well.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
A little bit of like the magic roundabout in here tonight. So Councillors Bamborough, Boughton and Bradley Mitchell, Councillors Smith and Carl Mitchell, Farrell, Walsh, Hoyle, Jones and Wilshaw, if you'd all like to leave the room.
Yeah, you do, yeah.
No, you don't need to go.
Thomas, wasn't it?
Yes.
So everyone's back that should be back, and everyone that should have left is gone. Fantastic. Over to you, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. This relates to proposed budget savings in relation to Blackpool Transport Services Limited, Blackpool Operating Company Limited, Blackpool Entertainment Company Limited and Blackpool Waste Services Limited, page 125 of the agenda. I move the part of the budget relating to savings in relation to those said companies, Blackpool Transport Services Limited, Blackpool Operating Company Limited, Blackpool Entertainment Company Limited and Blackpool Waste Services Limited at Appendix 4. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Seconder, Councillor Taylor. Any other speakers on this item? How did I know it would be you?
Absolutely. You may be a tad sick of my voice by the end of tonight now, I imagine. So, yeah, thank you, Mayor. In the last item in the budget, I did comment, Mayor, that I wasn't overly familiar with that particular item due to the lack of detail. The next four, I might not know those organisations, although one or two I might. But I do know very well how to run a business and how a non-executive director role works. My concern straight away is when you start to break those down is, and we've had a long history of doing this to some organisations, not just in this authority but others, Mayor, where we've actually taken dividends out of them and there is an inevitable consequence of that action. Eventually they run out of money. There is only so much money they have, and eventually we start to kill the golden goose. What does that mean for these organisations? An increased rent on the tram depot? Well, I suspect eventually that will play itself out with fare increases on buses and trams in the town. What does it look like for the Sandcastle and Winter Gardens? I suspect higher entry prices and higher prices of drinks. What does it look like for an Envico dividend? I don't know, but I dread to think what it involves, bearing in mind that's income is based around delivering key services that are essential to the town. And already we've seen other authorities, not a million miles away in the UK, in the recent times, actually start to say we're going to have to start cutting services. So my prediction is what this will do is it will see higher fares, higher entrance prices and reduced services. And again, absolutely no way can we support that. We heard earlier a really good argument. It made sense. I didn't agree with it, but I could understand Councillor Brooks's view that he had a long-term investment view as regards the HRA. That I cannot see how that determines the same for these companies. This only damages them, and that eventually is a debt that has to be repaid, and it will be repaid by the public, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Galley. Any further speakers? No. In that case, Councillor Williams, right to reply.
Just briefly, Mayor, thank you. It's not creating a debt that needs to be repaid. Your suspicions are ill-founded, and I wouldn't take up a job with Mystic Meg because your forecasts will be wrong. We've consulted with those companies and we would not take any step or engender any uncertainty towards those companies without, as I say, without their consultation and there being achievable and without harming any of the companies or their outturn or putting up prices. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. So a recorded vote is required on this part of the agenda as well.
Thank you, Mayor. It's a recorded vote on the motion, again in the name of Councillor Lynn Williams. Please could members indicate their answer with either yes, no or abstain. Councillor Baker? No. Councillor Neil Brooks? Yes. Councillor Pam Brooks? Yes. Councillor Sean Brooks?
Yes.
Councillor Badass?
Yes.
Councillor Cartmel?
Yes.
Councillor Cooper? Councillor Critchley?
Yes.
Councillor Ellison?
No.
Councillor Flanagan?
Yes.
Councillor Galley?
No.
Councillor Hobson?
Yes.
Councillor Hugo?
Yes.
Councillor Humphreys?
Yes.
Councillor Hunter?
Yes.
Councillor Jackson?
Yes.
Councillor Marshall?
Yes.
Councillor Diane Mitchell? Councillor Roberts? Councillor Rowe?
Yes.
Councillor Danny Scott?
No.
Councillor Michelle Scott?
No.
Councillor Sloman?
No.
Councillor Taylor?
Yes.
Councillor Warren?
No.
Councillor Williams?
Yes.
Mayor?
Yes. Mayor, members have voted as follows: 17 for the motion, 10 against.
So that motion is carried. We can let everyone back in there. Come on, thanks.
To move this one.
Right.
To move this one.
I don't know. Oh. Right.
We've got without it.
Oh, no, I could go, I could have.
Okay. So now we have the remainder of the budget savings and the setting of the council tax. So it's over to the leader of the council, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. So I move the council to agree the proposed remaining recommendation numbers 2.1 to 2.13 as outlined in agenda item 4 and updated in this order proceedings to reflect decisions taken at 1.1 and 2.1 above, and the Police and Crime Commissioner for Lancashire Precept and the Lancashire Combined Fire Authority Precept for the financial year 2024-25. Mayor, the primary purpose of my speech to Council this evening is to set out our budget plans for the financial year ahead. Before I get to that very important issue, I wanted to give some context, both from a national and a local perspective. I begin by making some comment on the national backdrop to this year's budget, and will then set out the main features of the proposed revenue budget for the year ahead. Finally, I turn my attention to the remarkable journey that our town and this council is on, setting out some of the very notable successes of the past year and highlighting what is going to be an extraordinary year ahead in terms of the ongoing regeneration, all of which is being made possible by the tough but forward-thinking budget decisions that we are making. And across all of this, it is Labour that continues to lead for Blackpool. Mayor, it seems each year that I've stood here, and my predecessor too, we stand here and say that the government needs to provide us with a sustainable way of setting our budget. Nothing changes. Year after year, with short-term settlements, a lack of funding and hardly any recognition of the serious challenges that are facing local authorities. Last year's finance settlement did provide the least deprived of local authorities with a 4.5% real terms average increase in spending power, whilst the most deprived received an 8% increase. Unfortunately, the affluent Southern Tory lobby has since grown in strength and a different approach has been used this year. The government has abandoned any recognition of deprivation and need, and any uplift in funding is almost uniform across the board. At the same time, the government's fair funding review has been postponed yet again and will not be known now until 2025-26 at the earliest, the outcome of which will determine how funding will be allocated to individual local authorities in the future. Sadly, that comes as no surprise. The government has shown precious little interest in ensuring local government has the means to provide services that are fit for purpose for the communities that they serve. This particular year, perhaps more than in previous years, this Tory government is focusing most of its attention on trying to save its own skin in the coming general election. We've got a Prime Minister and a Chancellor desperately trying to dish out tax breaks as pre-election sweeteners whilst the economy deteriorates and public services crumble. An incoming Labour government will reverse this nonsense and put the needs of our residents and the wider country first, and this cannot come quickly enough. The underlying figures behind the years of Tory cuts to local public services are shocking. This is a people's tragedy playing out in real time with horrendous impact upon all our communities. Since 2010, across the country, net spending on sport and leisure facilities is down 44%. England has lost 400 swimming pools. Councils have had to cut spending on sports development by 59% per person and on parks and open spaces by a third. Spending by councils across the country and community centres by 39% and library spending halved. Museum and gallery spending by 2/5, trading standards budgets cut by 50%, street cleansing by a fifth. Waste disposal and collection budgets squeezed by 11%. 9 of 10 areas made budget cuts to highways and transport services. Cuts to spending on houses have occurred in 84% of English council areas. According to figures produced by Sigoma, the authoritative voice on local government finance, Blackpool Council's core spending power equates to a cut of more than 23% and the loss of almost £830 for every household. In the financial year ahead, we are expected to save more than 60 million on the back of continuing cuts in central government funding, as well as dealing with inflation and rising demand for key services in social care, which have now been inadequately funded for more than a decade. We remain determined not to be undermined by this politically motivated attack on local public services, and we will not allow the continuing devastating effect of austerity to become normalised. We will continue to do all we can to ensure that future generations are not impacted by this entrenched inequality. Turning now to our budget and the reality of where we find ourselves. On the back of another prolonged episode of Tory economic mismanagement and the infamous kamikaze budget, inflation over the past year has remained high and monies received from central government have not increased by the same percentage, leading to a real term cut in funding. High inflation has also resulted in increasing in energy costs and costs of providing support in both adults and children's services. Rising demand for services continues to place pressure on the council's budget, particularly in adult social care, children's services, transport for those with special educational needs and disabilities, and provision of temporary accommodation and homelessness. This rising demand for services is even greater in places like Blackpool due to our levels of deprivation. Everybody recognises this. We in Labour believe passionately in paying our workers, including all of our care staff, a real living wage. We have seen the cost of providing the living wage go up some 28% across 3 years. This falls on our shoulders and not matched by government funding, but we have found the money, difficult as this is, as it's the right thing to do. How quickly this government has forgotten the extraordinary work that so many people on low pay did on our nation's service during the darkest days of the pandemic. This Labour Council will not forget. And so, Mayor, with all these pressures and chronic underfunding, we have a deficit that we must make good. All council directorates are being required to make efficiency savings, including renegotiation of external contracts, increased income generation and reduced spend on supplies and services. Our employees will continue to be asked to take a minimum of 5 days unpaid leave. Over the past year, there has been increased scrutiny on the recruitment of new staff. When an employee leaves the authority, these posts are not automatically replaced. A panel of senior officers review every recruitment request, with only essential roles receiving approval. As a result of these and other measures, we've been able to limit the impact on job losses to around 50 posts that have either been frozen or removed. As a council, we are very much aware of the financial pressure that everyone out there is under, and we have gone to great lengths through our Blackpool Together campaign to offer tangible support and help to mitigate the impact on households. The last thing that we want to do is add to the pain, and I truly wish we did not have to increase council tax by the maximum allowable figure of 5%, with 2% of that ring-fenced to meet the escalating costs of adult social care. We have no other option than to apply this increase if we are to avoid slashing essential services for our most vulnerable. The vast majority of other English local authorities, 95%, will also apply the maximum allowable council tax increase. Sorry, excuse me. It is important to note that the government had already assumed we would apply this increase in all their calculations, So any boasts about increases in what they describe as our core spending power are simply untrue. The harsh reality is that we are being forced down this path. Every effort will be made to work with the public partners, voluntary and private sectors to minimise the impact on those who need and depend on our services. I have previously made the point in this chamber about the inherent unfairness of council tax. It is a system in desperate need of change. The tax is based on property values from 1990 and it is highly regressive in nature. I've done a bit of research and I pay £100 more council tax a year for my Band C home in Brunswick, Blackpool than a millionaire in their multi-million valued Band H property in Westminster. That isn't Westminster Road, Claremont, that is Westminster in the middle of London. How is the system right or fair? How is it right that people in deprived areas starved of investment pay more than very wealthy people in well-heeled inner London? Council tax rises and the social care precept is not the solution to long-term pressures faced by councils, particularly where increases in cost and demand do not align with capacity to raise council tax. The system is a mess and it's a high time that the government took responsibility and sorted it. In this context, we find ourselves seeking external funding and maximising income opportunities will also be vital. Despite the absence of funding for local authorities and the level of funding cuts we are facing here in Blackpool, what I can say is that we will continue to invest in the things that mean the most to our residents. This budget evidences that commitment. We are making it a continued priority to protect vital community services such as libraries, parks, leisure centres, public protection and waste. These things matter dearly to the residents of Blackpool and to Labour. We will continue to deliver all of the extraordinary free events that our residents enjoy and provide a huge boost to our visitor economy. We will continue to invest in our highways, saving money and improving roads. Just today, I've received the data on our highways performance over the last 13 years. Staggeringly, thanks to our programme of proactive investment, claims to the council related to our highways declined by 97.1% between 2010 and 2023. I am proud to be able to say that we are investing the most in youth services that we've ever done over the last 15 years. We continue to pay the real living wage for all of our staff, and despite the significant challenge, have stuck to our commitment to do the same for our care workers, most of whom live in our town and are supporting our most vulnerable residents, family and friends. Our free school breakfast initiative is going from strength to strength and is now in its 11th year. Swimming for our under 16 in school holidays continues. And we are seeing some positive outcomes in children's services with a steady reduction of the number of children in care. Evidence shows us that when we can keep families together, it has a lifelong positive impact on their outcomes, opportunities and life chances. Our focus on recruitment has seen positive results with a significant reduction in agency staff employed by the council, creating a more stable, sustainable workforce and delivering continuity for our families. Children's services represents 36% of the council's revenue spend, but these measures are helping to tackle the financial challenges that we and so many other local authorities are facing. This year, the number of staff placed at risk is in single figures. However, freezing or removing vacant posts will undoubtedly have an impact on the remaining workforce and the level of service that we are able to provide. It's against this backdrop that we have to find a way to set a legal, balanced budget for the year ahead without impacting on vital services or stalling the giant strides we are making in turning around Blackpool's economic fortunes. It is a difficult balancing act, but we believe that this budget will enable us to deliver our key priorities. I would like to thank all the officers, members and partners who have helped us navigate this extraordinarily difficult task. Mayor, agreeing a budget against the backdrop of rising costs and diminishing funds is obviously challenging, not least because the decisions we take play an integral part in our commitment to delivering a brighter future for Blackpool and its residents. With that in mind, it is to our recent achievements and plans for the future that I turn. This time last year, I set out for Labour's vision for what we wanted to achieve to create a better Blackpool, create good and sustainable jobs for our residents, invest in our young people and support our community, invest in our visitor economy to cement our place as the UK's favourite family resort, create better neighbourhoods, homes and green spaces, invest in our infrastructure and all our futures. No matter what challenges or obstacles come our way, we are determined to continue to turn that vision into reality with purpose and pride. And there are already so many tangible examples of the remarkable progress that we are making. In the past year alone, we have opened a new anchor store in the Hounshill Shopping Centre, incorporating our Frasers and Flannels, making us one of the few towns and cities that have successfully filled the gap left by Debenhams' demise with a high-quality retail offer. Grown our annual visitor numbers to more than 20 million on the back of a two-month extension to the illumination season and the expansion of the hugely successful Christmas by the Sea event that has turned Blackpool into a popular winter destination. Opened the reimagined Abingdon Street Market with a contemporary food and retail offer. Its success has changed the dynamic of Cedar Square and the wider town centre early evening and nighttime economy. Started the construction of a £100 million civil service hub that has already changed the Blackpool skyline and which bring in over 3,000 new office workers and jobs into the heart of the town centre when it opens in 2025. Delivered thousands more jobs at our enterprise zone, bringing higher paid advanced manufacturing and digital jobs to Blackpool. Secured national portfolio organisation status and 4 years of funding for both the Grundy Art Gallery and, for the first time, Blackpool Illuminations and Lightpool Festival, recognising their importance to the UK's cultural heritage. Lightpool is the only light festival in the UK to achieve MPO status. We've handed over the keys to scores of new council homes to local residents who are having their lives transformed through access to a secure, warm, affordable home. I invite anyone to look at our wonderful new council housing at Troutbeck and Grange Park and share the pride we feel in delivering these homes for our people. And finally, we've secured a draft devolution deal that has the potential to transfer powers and money from Whitehall to a newly created combined county authority that will allow us to take more control of our own destiny by allowing us to tackle key local priorities. And through the successive negotiations, we've agreed a deal that means that crucial assets such as our wonderful tramway will remain in the council's ownership and control. By any standards, Mayor, this is a remarkable progress and there is much more to come. 2024 is shaping up to be a landmark year in Blackpool's ongoing £2 billion programme of regeneration. Over the coming weeks and months, we will open Showtown, our brand new museum of fun and entertainment, with the doors opening to the public on March the 15th. Situated on the Golden Mile, it is expected to attract more than 200 visitors a year. More importantly, it will be free to residents, giving them the opportunity to celebrate Blackpool's rich heritage as the home of popular culture. Open a new 1,300 space multi-storey car park, paving the way for future phases of the £300 million Blackpool Central leisure development. Complete and open the 4-star Holiday Inn and Marco's New York Italian restaurant within the £350 million Talbot Gateway scheme. Complete the tramway extension that will link the mainline rail station at Blackpool North with the tram link that will serve residents, commuters and visitors. Open the new Backlock Cinema and Diner in a prime location between the Winter Gardens and the Hounshill Shopping Centre, featuring one of the largest IMAX screens in the UK. The cinema, with a further 8 state-of-the-art digital screens, will provide another exciting dimension to our flourishing town centre economy. We will commence work on the £7.5 million renovation of the 1930s Art Deco Stanley buildings on Church Street to create much-needed meeting and co-work space for new and growing small businesses. We will see the start of work on a new purpose-built courthouse on the site of the former Devonshire Road Hospital. This follows the securing of 40 million from the government's levelling up funding, enabling the relocation of the existing facility alongside the planned Blackpool Central development. We will continue with the site assembly for the new multiversity education campus to be built on a site opposite the new civil service hub. It will eventually enable Blackpool and the Fylde College to relocate, bringing up to 3,000 staff and students into the heart of the town centre. We will begin work in the 62 million coastal protection scheme that will replace and upgrade the sea defences at Bisping, protecting more than 12,000 properties. Complete the delivery of over 130 fantastic new council homes at Grange Park, meaning that we deliver some 500 new council homes to our residents since 2018. Continue to pilot new enforcement approaches on behalf of the Department of Levelling Up Housing and Communities to tackle standards in our private rental sector and use our hard-won pilot status to urge the government to legislate to introduce a new decent home standard for the sector. I am very proud of that list of Labour achievements in the face of over a decade of Tory cuts, and one that belies the negativity and distortion that we all too often see in some media coverage that bears little or no resemblance to what is actually happening on the ground here. And we haven't relied solely on retail to regenerate our town centre, as happened in many places. We are one of the few locations that has replaced an empty Debenhams store with a new high-quality department store offer but we're also bringing about transformational change by delivering projects that will bring thousands of well-paid jobs into the town centre and investing in new leisure facilities that will revitalise our early evening and nighttime economy. And through the multiversity, we will add to this mix by bringing thousands of students into our town centre for the first time. In terms of housing, we are determined to do everything we possibly can to provide more decent, warm and affordable homes for our residents. We are one of the few local authorities in the country building council housing again at scale. And we are the local authority that set up Blackpool Housing Company, which has now created 700 fantastic homes out of failed properties in our inner areas. We are one of the very few councils trialling enforcement powers, shaping government thinking on the future of housing standards and regeneration. Regeneration, of course, isn't just about big capital projects, as important as they are for our town's future prosperity. It's about our people and our communities. When we consulted with residents as part of this budget process, there were some common themes coming back to us around better quality housing, good quality jobs, affordable transport, leisure activities and support for families. These public views are absolutely aligned to our own priorities. It is about getting to the heart of the community and not just protecting services, but improving them so that they are more relevant and accessible to our residents. There are numerous examples. Here are a few highlights. We are working closely with Homes England and central government to secure funding that will have a transformational impact on the housing stock in Blackpool's inner areas, to include taking forward master planning in South Shore, Claremont areas. It is a big ask, but one that we know is vitally important in terms of improving quality of life. I hope that it will not be too long before I can bring some more positive news in this regard. We have secured £5 million of funding to roll out a health inequalities research project that will help us transform our services and systems to work better and more efficiently for our local communities. We've invested more than £6 million in sports and leisure facilities across the town, including the opening of the new Common Edge Community Sports Village, which has already attracted more than 34,000 visits since it opened last summer, as well as new and improved sports facilities at Stanley Park and development of public tennis courts at 4 sites. We are working closely with Blackpool Football Club on preparations for the delivery of fantastic new community sports facilities in the heart of Revo. We've opened 3 family hubs in Blackpool to give families access to a range of support, learning and fun activities, and are investing heavily in our new approach to family safeguarding. This year, we will see the completion of the works to significantly increase the capacity of our outstanding special school High Furlong, enabling more children and their families to access the support they need close to home and supporting them to thrive. We reduced the number of children in the pupil referral unit by over half, with far more children supported in mainstream schools with their peers. We've established the Blackpool Youth Partnership, made up of key agencies from across the youth sector to work with young people. This has already led to securing of £1.7 million from the Youth Investment Fund to develop new facilities for the Blackpool Boys and Girls Club on Gorton Street. We've launched Be Who You Want to Be, a joint action plan between the council and community groups in Claremont to celebrate diversity and inclusion and the history and heritage of the LGBTQ+ community. And we've signed the Fast Track Cities Declaration with the aim of eradicating HIV transmission by 2030 and challenging stigma and prejudice. We've invested £2 million in improved CCTV, moving from 92 cameras to over 300 to help tackle crime and antisocial behaviour and protect our residents and businesses. We're acting to protect our young people, especially around schools, where we're installing double red lines to improve safety. We've established Blackpool Together, a town-wide multi-agency partnership to support our residents through the cost of living crisis. We've delivered vital public health initiatives across our communities, including the early parenthood service to support families, school nurse drop-in sessions for all primary schools, a significant piece of research work designed to combat the prevalence of vaping among children and young people, and a continuation of our work to reduce the health issues associated with smoking. We provided support for more than 1,000 young job seekers through our award-winning Youth Employment Hub, the platform, with around 500 of those successfully moving into work, training or education. This complements the wide range of employment support we already offer to older job seekers through our Positive Steps service. We provided tailored community learning opportunities for over 1,200 residents in essential skills such as literacy, numeracy, digital and employability skills. We supported the development of a new cultural strategy for Blackpool, working alongside a wide range of arts and cultural organisations set to launch in 2024. We've taken steps to protect the rights of tenants by piloting new national measures that will create a decent home standard for the private rented sector and crack down on bad landlords. We extended our Vitaline Falls lifting service to care homes with further evidence of reduced pressure on the ambulance service, but also supporting residents living independently. In terms of delivering our climate emergency agenda, we continue to make great progress. Through our Eco Coaching Hub, which saves households both money and carbon emissions by providing in-house tips and equipment for improved energy efficiency, we have saved over 500 tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent across more than 1,000 homes since its inception. We have also made energy efficiency upgrades to Flatstone Grange Park, completed 30 new council homes featuring the latest solar and air source heat pump technology, secured 360,000 of funding to roll out electric vehicle charging infrastructure with a potential 1.7 million to follow. We have already installed additional electric vehicle charging facilities at 5 sites across the town, including 25 at the new Blackpool Central multi-storey. We've installed solar panels on the roof of the Winter Gardens, which are estimated to save over 1 million operating costs over their lifetime. And we intend to go further than this, putting solar panels on more of our leisure assets and buildings in the months ahead. We've allocated shared prosperity funding to various projects, including the provision of 3 water butts to reduce community flood risk, and we've launched the Blackpool Net Zero Business Academy, offering expert advice to local businesses on how to reduce their carbon footprint and energy costs. This year we'll also see the launch of a new Eco Hub at Palatine Library, our first net zero library, but more importantly offering impartial advice and financial support to residents aiming to insulate homes or install the latest technologies in conjunction with the Council's Green Team and Cosy Homes in Lancashire. Preparations continue to deliver on our commitment for the Blackpool Transport to establish an electric vehicle bus fleet plus plans to develop a solar farm on our enterprise zone. All of this work has not gone unnoticed. The Local Government Chronicle awarded us a highly commended in a national competition for climate response. Voluntary reporting of our work to the internationally recognised Carbon Disclosure Project resulted in us being awarded an overall A score and an A for our work on climate adaptation, the latter putting us in the same company as cities such as Paris, Milan and New Orleans. So it is with Labour that we are thinking about what it is right for our residents and town in the now as well as the future. Mayor, I will now draw my speech to a close. I make no apologies for spelling out in detail what is a very extensive list of Labour achievements and ambitions, and I must of course pay great credit and thanks to the skill and tenacity of our officers who achieve so much. Our residents want good jobs, quality housing, better neighbourhoods, green spaces, safer streets, improved leisure facilities and affordable transport. Our young people want better opportunities in terms of training, education and employment. Our businesses want investment in infrastructure and a thriving year-round tourism economy so that they too can invest with confidence. We know this because he told us, we listened and we're doing it. This Labour Council knows what Blackpool needs and we are making it happen. The months ahead will provide even more compelling evidence of that. I urge Westminster to also do the right thing and address the growing crisis of funding of local public services. It must do what it has so often promised in terms of reforming the financing of local government. Only with adequate long-term resources, certainty and freedoms, including a multi-year settlement, can councils deliver top-class local services for our communities, tackle the climate emergency and level up all parts of the country. This budget, like the ones before, has involved making very difficult decisions. However, it is one that ensures the financial viability of the council whilst enabling us to continue to do what is right for the people of Blackpool. And what is right for the people and the businesses of Blackpool extends to so much of our country. Our nation is in desperate need of vision, hope and a programme of government that is delivered in the interest of the majority. We've had 14 years of Tory chaos and failure. The shocking consequences surround us all. Public services on their knees, deprivation and inequality continuing to rise, child poverty continuing to escalate, economic crises, and a few people doing really well at the top whilst everyone else pays for it. There is an alternative, and soon in the general election we will all have our choice. We can all see what Labour is delivering as it leads to Blackpool. It is now time for Labour to lead our nation. Thank you, Mayor, and I commend this budget to the Council.
Thank
Thank you, Councillor Williams. So it's over to the Leader of the Principal Opposition. Sorry, didn't second it there. Terribly sorry. Now it's over to Councillor Galley.
Thank you, Mayor. I suspect there will be two reactions to this budget, Mayor. One will be the Labour councillors who clapped and cheered it, and the other reaction will be the public of Blackpool, the people in their homes, the people in the parks, the cafes, the streets, the pubs, will all be talking over the next week as they find out that they're now paying 4.9% extra in their council tax, that their rents have gone up, that borrowings have gone up. They're not going to be particularly happy with the direction, and it's not going to be applause and cheers that they greet this budget with, Mayor. They're going to be absolutely appalled. What I'm going to do in my speech tonight, if I may, Mayor, is I'm going to break down an analysis of the health of the Blackpool economy. Look at our council tax, our borrowings, our children's services, and our adult services. And from that point, I'm then going to propose an alternative, narrative-based budget that I believe will answer some of the highlights and concerns that we have identified in our analysis, that shows why you should never have clapped that budget tonight. In fact, you should have been horrified at what you've done. So, if I may, and before I start on the analysis, there are just a few false narratives that I wanted to correct, Mayor. I was a little concerned that Councillor Smith earlier kept talking about a 10% inflation rate. If that's where your numbers have come from, then it makes sense as to why you're doing what you're doing. The actual, as we stand, the consumer price inflation rate is currently set at 4.2%. This budget represents a 7.9% increase, meaning that we're 3.7% over inflation, Mayor. The other one we talked about is our core spending. Since 2021, we're currently 35.9 million increased on that. That's core spending, and that's the non-council tax elements of that rise. The other area is the budget gap. We constantly have heard of, in recent times, that's actually been broken down into three core areas, the biggest of which, and the narrative from the leader, Mayor, is that that's largely government cuts. The truth is different. The truth is that it's actually increases in children's and adults spending of 9.9 million. The non-recurrent savings that had to be made because we borrowed so much from last year's budget. And then the final bit are some treasury management pressures, but nowhere in the league that was described. Now, if I may, I'll turn into the analysis that I did, Mayor. And this starts with council tax. 73% currently of our council tax base, Mayor, is made up of bands A and B. Of those bands, 42% are paying full council tax in band A, and in band B, 56.8% are paying full council tax. Any other economy, that figure is much more evenly spread. Does not look like 73%. It's much more evenly spread with more Ds, more Es, more Fs, more Cs. Yet in Blackpool, they're a minority. And why does that matter? It matters because these are our poorest people. They cannot pay anymore. Yet we keep putting it up. And then we start to look at some comparisons. People in Lytham are paying paying less than in Blackpool. The people of Poulton are paying less than the people of Blackpool. The people of Wyre are paying less than Blackpool. And then it gets worse as we spread that out further. The people of Blackburn are paying less than the people of Blackpool. The people of Cheshire East are paying considerably less than the people of Blackpool. The people of Birmingham are paying less. The people of Stoke are paying less. And we start to identify some trends here, Mayor, as to our council tax base. Why does this matter? Because all of them have a better spread of bands. And the other thing that none of them have that Blackpool does, and I mentioned it earlier, is that we have one of the lowest wages in the country. Our median wage is 21,000. It gets worse when we look at part-time income. Part-time wages are often earned by females. So our ability to pay gets smaller as we increase this tax. And you're right to say it's an unfair tax, but it is this council that constantly puts it up. It's this council that doesn't actually recognise that our bands are all heavily tilted in A and B and not evenly spread, and asking the question, what do we do about that? But it gets worse. This is the first year, Mayor, and the figures were confirmed, and I'd worked them out, and I was £2 out, and that was significant, because if I was any more, then I would be hugely concerned about the rest of the figures that I'd worked out in this analysis. This year, because of the council tax increase, Band C goes over the 2,000 mark. So everybody who lives in a Band C property is now going to be hitting the £2,000 mark. If we start to look, though, at what does the future look like, we're in this current trend of 4.9% increase, Mayor. In 2026, 2027, we hit some more key points if we carry on at 4.9%. Band E breaks the 3,000 level. Band G, the 4,000 level. Band H, heaven help you if you're in one of those, the 5,000 level. But it gets even worse, and this is the scary bit for me, Mayor. The numbers do not lie. This is mathematically worked out, and I was £2 out, so I'm pretty confident those figures are right. 27 to 28, Band B hits the £2,000 mark. One of our poorest groups of housing stock, the people with less income start having to pay £2,000 a year. That cannot be sustained. What will happen, and we have all heard of recent times, I've certainly raised it in other places, and I know some of the members opposite are aware because we've discussed it, is that we start to see something akin to the council tax version of the Laffer curve, which is the higher the tax, the less income you generate from that. And that's going to happen to Blackpool. We already have, Mayor, the lowest council tax collection rates in England. Imagine what these multiples start to look like. 4.9%, I talked about it when we did the council tax reduction scheme. When you're dealing with multiples, everything increases against itself times whatever you're multiplying it by. And 4.9 starts to become significant on bigger numbers when you start putting 3 zeros at the end. But ultimately, though, this works against us, Mayor, because what it does is it starts to reduce, and the council leader mentioned a number of projects that the team have been working on, and great, we are absolutely delighted some of those projects are coming online, like the new cinema. But why does this matter? Because what starts to happen is another economic trend, is that people's consumable income goes down, because it's all going on fixed costs. So it means that Blackpool's spending power of our residents gets smaller. It means with that reduced domestic spend, because we're a seasonal economy, it means we cannot sustain all of the attractions that we need to have running out of seasonal hours, which means more people get thrown into part-time work because there isn't full-time work for them to do in the largest part of our economy. And what does that mean? It means they all start having to go on to council tax reduction schemes and other things because they cannot afford this. And I'm absolutely terrified that it's not been recognised by the leadership that we need to diversify our council tax bands. And then it gets worse. I started to analyse our borrowings, Mayor. At the last full council, I raised the question of our short-term borrowings, the 31st of January. Now, I was under the impression, when I asked that question, I was pretty worried at that point, that we were on 200 million at that point on short-term borrowings. Actually, I was wrong. On that very day, our short-term borrowings, Mayor, went up to 275.9 million. If only I'd known that on the day. What does the interest alone on that look like? 6.3 million. And then we start to look at the month 12 forecast. Bearing in mind that's only month 10, Mayor. By month 12, we were coming up to it, it would mean we'll be hitting 7.6 million interest. It keeps going up. And that's the nature, again, of interest. It keeps going up. But it has to be paid within 12 months in a short-term borrowing. This is a big number to be paid within 12 months. But what does our long-term borrowing look like at the same time of that 275? It looks like 183.7 million with interest of 6.9 million. The combined interest alone on these numbers, Mayor, is 14.4 million. That means that the numbers that we have there are, for every man, woman and child, we are currently paying £3,908. For any baby born today in Blackpool, we immediately give them a debt of £3,908 to pay. Now, then it gets worse. The actual budget that we're being signed up to tonight, and we've had cheers, we're absolutely really excited about this apparently, is by 2026-2027, The future looks like our combination of debt will be 640 million. That's an increase. And the interest alone will be 23.8 million, Mayor. Where's this going to come from? Well, that's a 60% increase on debt from the year 2017. Why is that significant? Interest rates have gone up. It now costs more to borrow, and yet we're borrowing more money at a time interest rates have gone up. There is no... I'm pleased that some of the members are awake for my speech, because they certainly look like they were semi-asleep for their leaders. So we get to the core point, because what does that look like in terms of the cost per child, the cost per man, the cost per woman in this town? At that point, every person will be paying £4,520. That's what we'll be giving every child. We are borrowing off people that haven't even been born yet. At a time interest rates are higher. This does not make any sense. So we now have a situation where this economy, this Blackpool economy, is choking in a sea of debt, in a sea of high tax. And the only place I've ever seen anything like it, Mayor, was in Zimbabwe, and it doesn't end very well, because eventually people don't want to lend to you anymore, because you can't pay it back, because your tax base can't pay those debts back. And that's what's happening. That's our current trajectory. I've worked it out, and I am convinced if we continue on that trajectory, we have a huge problem coming in 2 or 3 years' time. But now let's look at some of our areas where we consume, Mayor. So we look at adults. And over the last 10 years, or the first 10 years or so that I was elected, our adult services team worked miracles. We all recognise their hard work. They outperformed every national trend, and that they didn't make a loss. In recent years, the last 2 years, we've seen overspends of 2.2 million and 2 million. Now, those have been broken down when I've found out as to why commissioning placements, supported living, and hospital discharge costs, Mayor. So now we're giving them an increase of budget of 9.4 million in order to rectify that. However, this is something else that now starts to play itself out, which is our demographic figures. Blackpool is older than other places. Our average age is older. We're 45. Its average age is 41 in England. But when we actually look at the census data, it actually, I think, gets worse than that. I think that's a false number. And the reason why it's false is if you look at how many people are the age 50 to 59 in Blackpool, Mayor, 21,000 of them, which means these people in the next few years are looking to retire. Now, when we look at how many people who are in the age bracket of 20 and 29 who eventually will replace them, we only have 15,000. So that means we're going to see huge pressures of people that need care, and who is going to do it? Who's going to manage that care process? So again, in the budget, there was absolutely no mention of how that's going to be dealt with. We are, in effect, running out of people. And now it gets the really scary numbers in terms of spends, and we'll all be familiar with this. Children's overspends. So when we first became councillors, Mayor, in 2011, the cost of children's services at that point was 23.4 million. And wow, wouldn't we like it to be that again? What does that look like now? It looks like 59.6 million. But what's key between that? What is the bridge that links that? Every year from 2010 to this very year, we've actually 2011 to this very year, overspends in children, and this isn't multiplied, this is literally addition, it's 55.7 million. 55.7 million in overspends. Absolutely dreadful. What does that work out per person? It works out at £393 per person has been overspent on this core area. Bearing in mind we failed 2 Ofsted reports in that time as well. The breakdown of costs, and this is where it's absolutely crucial we now start to break down children's services into their costs as well. It can no longer be generated by the discussion of what's looked after children. It now needs to be broken down, Mayor, into something much more detailed. So let's break those costs down. 2013, we had 41 children in residential care at a cost of 4.5 million at that point. We then move forward to December 2023, Mayor, We now have 71 children in residential care at a cost of 20.5 million, an increase of 16 million. External fostering. We'll start to pick the trend here, Mayor. In June 2013, we had 72 children in external fostering, a cost of 2.6 million. We move forwards to December 2023. We have now 102 children more, 174 children in total. The total cost has gone up to 10.2 million. But then we compare that to our own internal fostering team, and you see a different pattern. We're in June 2013, so these are all parallel numbers. We had 263 children there in our internal fostering system at a total cost of 3.1 million. We moved forwards now to December 2023, and what does the number say? It's gone down. You know, everything else has gone up, but not in this area. It's actually gone down to 184 children at a total cost of 3.6 million. And therein lies the difference. Our external costs have gone up dramatically, and the costs that we can control have gone down in terms of the numbers, and the costs have roughly stabilised. Now, before I move forward into what we're going to do, I just wanted to thank the officers. Every one of the council officers has been incredible. They've shared data, they've been incredibly transparent with me. Some would say Steve Thompson is a legend. I would say he's better than that. I would say he is an honest man. He hasn't at any point hidden any of this information. It is available for us all to see. He does not hide from this, and he is excellent at what he does, and I think we're all very grateful for what he does and that we have him, as are all of our excellent officers. And I didn't want to move on from this without thanking them, because without that data, we can't start to plan some of these key things. So what did I do with all of that data? And it's something I've been working on for a long, long time. I was once wanting to apply it in another country, but I'm now applying it to Blackpool, and sadly I referenced Zimbabwe earlier. Sadly, the parallels are exactly the same in terms of our direction of travel. So we've come up with a new economic formula. A new economic formula that I genuinely believe, Mayor, will transform this town. It will do all the things that we need it to do in terms of not just saying, how can we save a bit of money here? How can we save a bit of money there? It will do some of the long-term things that we need to address, which is bring down our borrowings, create a more diverse council tax base, and therefore become much more sustainable and not a victim of any other authorities and organisations, regardless of what they do. And I'm absolutely delighted tonight, Mayor, to announce the creation of something called Blackpoolnomics. It's a whole new economic theory that we have written that will address these questions over the long term. I'm quite happy to share it with any member. It will only be delivered by the Blackpool Conservative Group, because we're the only ones who understand what's going on with it, but I'm more than happy to share it. This will address those long-term issues that we have seen and identified in the local economy, and make sure Blackpool becomes the sorts of place, the place that we want it to be and absolutely need it to be. So in terms of the budget savings, Mayor, I did have a number of options, because crucially, it can start now, Mayor. It can start with some simple things. It can start with the freezing of council tax, for example, and stop us going into a place where eventually Band B is paying £2,000, which is exactly where we're heading on the current trajectory. So how would we do that? So we've already established the risks. The risks are council tax base is too small and directed into too much dependency on bands A and B. Children's services costs, adult services costs, and our short-term borrowings are far too high and heading in the wrong direction. But it also takes into account emerging risks, Mayor. School transport, homeless families. The council's dedicated schools grant is projected to be in deficit within 2 years. What are we going to do about that? How do we start to plan what that looks like, Mayor? So the current target in order to save, to freeze council tax is £3.551 million and £600. So in the last few weeks, we were given an additional 1.8 million in the adult support grant, 200,000 business rate returns for 2013 2014 extra. So our new target suddenly became 1.551, 600. So where would we start? And I'm absolutely delighted to confirm, Mayor, that the Blackpool Conservative Group would have done the following if we were in that position on that side of the chamber. We would have worked on counter fraud, so we would have made some savings by merging diversity and equality with HR, and with those savings we would have invested into a new council tax fraud specialist with our initial returns delivering estimated £200,000 of lost council tax revenue, and we've based that on projects that have been seen in Ealing and Torbay in terms of the way they use the electoral roll to identify council tax fraud on single persons, I should say. We would also review temporary accommodation providers, bearing in mind there's an emerging risk on the horizon. So we would work with My Blackpool Homes and Families of Blackpool to reduce those 1 million costs currently before they rise even more, and work with a new scheme called Family Home Partners, and we estimate that would save us 100,000. Children's Services, we are absolutely delighted to announce a new project that we want to push and will continue to push over the years to come there, around significant foster care investment, bearing in mind the breakdown of data that I talked about earlier. We would invest in our foster carers. We would radically increase rates for foster carers, establish retention fees, and incentivise children's social workers and other support workers to increase the number of internal foster placements which could be provided in Blackpool. And what does that mean on the ground? It means we could potentially, bearing in mind our children's services have identified there are up to 25 children in residential care that could be moved into the right supported foster support. We could move those 25 with this new investment, with this new plan, and save some incredible costs that we're currently spending on the shocking sums that are going to external residential places and agency foster carers, Mayor. Then within adult services, we recognise the risk. We recognise that people are getting older in Blackpool, Mayor, and we don't have the people to replace them. We also recognise the number of issues as people live longer at the same time. And what we would do, especially with an economy where we have lots of people with lots of different ailments, what would we do, Mayor? We would create, especially around discharge and support, but we would create a Blackpool remodelling team, and they would regularly review all packages in adult services, all the care packages. And we believe that would have significant savings, but equally, crucially, provide better quality support for the people who need those packages. We would also work very closely with the ICB, with the Adult Social Care Discharge Fund, that we saw an increased grant of 2.54 million in this budget, delivered by the Better Care Fund, ensuring again that money is spent wisely and can do more things than just the primary purpose. Often the core benefits are around the secondary benefits and are just as important as the primary. What would we also do? We would reform Your Blackpool, that magazine that most of us never get. Currently the cost on that is £55,092 a year. We would ensure that that is self-funded, just in the way that we do a lot of the Visit Blackpool magazines. Councillor allowances would be reduced back to 22 levels, and that would save us around 39 to 40,000. We would freeze director salaries, Mayor. We would review all catering, conferencing and award events, hotel accommodation costs. All councillors, for example, should pay for their own expenses to attend award ceremonies, Mayor. We believe the significant savings will be found in that area. We would also, and we've said this for a long time, we're absolutely keen that we review all of our procurement contracts, especially in areas that aren't in procurement. A lot of services buy their own things. We're very keen to do a lot of work with those services to make sure we get the best long-term deals as well as the best prices. And sometimes in purchasing, it's not necessarily the price you buy at, it's the maintenance of the thing you've brought. And especially with Blackpool's climate, we're very keen to ensure that that's carried out. We would review all uses of agencies in recruitment. We have a limited number of agency staff currently in Blackpool, numbering in its 30s, and credit to all the council officers for ensuring that that is the case. However, we do use permanent agency staff, i.e. we pay those large fees. So I would love to see those reviewed. And as somebody who's worked in the recruitment field, that's something I'm absolutely passionate about, knowing how agencies work. Long-term investment strategy. So I talked earlier that we've identified a number of flaws in the Blackpool economy that if we don't address will eventually mean we cannot be funded unless we have huge amounts of external funding. But it doesn't necessarily fix the core problem. So we couldn't borrow our way because you've removed that option from us. We couldn't tax our way because you've removed that option. So that only leaves two really. One will be government grants to do it. But in order to have full control, we wanted to create an investment team that actually reaches out beyond Blackpool and around the world to actually bring private investment and help us to diversify our council tax base. And we've seen examples of that play out in Manchester currently. And this would help create better housing and new homes in Blackpool. The other long-term investment strategy we would have launched tonight would have been the creation of Blackpool Carbon Credit System. Currently, the international exchange of carbon credits is pretty rotten by some players. Some, but not all. And what we want to do is replace the sum with a Blackpool model. So anybody in the United Kingdom who has a firm and wants to trade their carbon-producing activity against non-carbon credits would buy ours. And with the consequences of the fund that we would grow from that, we would be able to deliver on building a green space within 15 minutes of where every resident of Blackpool lives, something we're absolutely passionate about, because green spaces where they live means happier and healthier people, which starts to feed into some of those other deeper numbers that we're seeing in terms of low-level depression and physical health issues that deal and attack some of our productivity challenges. And crucially, and I was delighted that the leader said this, and so I suspect we may have found something that we agree on in this budget, which was I was really pleased to hear about the investment that you're wanting to carry out with renewable energy. Currently, for those that don't know, Blackpool spends just over £5 million a year on its electricity costs in terms of the council. Bearing in mind some of that, about half is for our lights, our street lighting, but the other half is for our buildings. So we believe with the work that we've already started to do in terms of the maintenance contracts on some projects locally and that I'm aware of, because of the high electric prices, that we can deliver payback on a lot of those schemes within 7 years. And significantly, that will bring that figure down by 1.5 million to 3.5 million. I actually think it's more, but I try to be absolutely rational and treat this more as an exercise in economics as much as politics. If I wanted to say it was politics, I would have brought the number far greater. So just to confirm, Mayor, I'm absolutely delighted that the Blackpool Conservative Group can offer Blackpoolnomics. This will be strengthened over the years to come, and we will continue to invest our time and the time of the people in this town into that model. Because, as I say, if we don't, then crucially, we will fail. We will fail, Mayor. And I'm glad Councillor Taylor finds it funny, because that means high tax, high debt, which is what your budget will be remembered for, high rents, and it cannot be sustained. The people of this town cannot afford these increases. And only the Blackpool Conservatives will, with our alternative, which I'm absolutely delighted to announce tonight, and we will work with the public of the town to strengthen it over the years to come, can deliver an economy, crucially an economy and not just a budget, that actually is more diverse in its council tax base, and crucially, Mayor, is happier and healthier. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Galley. Do we have any other speakers? Oh, okay. Councillor Hobson first, please.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Councillor Galley. I mean, you spent some time talking about children's services there, so if I just address a few of those points. First of all, I am hugely proud of our Children's Services Department. We're doing some absolutely incredible work. Looked after children numbers are lower than they have been in years, as are the number of children seeking children need plans. And we've got lots of families accessing our early help. You mentioned about fostering, about sort of reducing expensive placements. We are already well on the way with that. We've made huge reductions this year thanks to an absolutely fantastic head of service, and she does have some quite ambitious aims for the year. So we are already on with that. But just as a kind of general point, the LGA have recently released a report that says 2 in 3 councils are going to be overspending on children's services over the next 2 years. The Chartered Institute of Public Finance, CIPFA, has also done a recent report that says we have increased 27% in terms of children's numbers as a country since 2010. Now, I asked Council what happened in 2010. Is there anything that happened there? Austerity. It's almost like when you introduce austerity and you put families into deprivation, children's numbers increase. I mean, have I missed something there? Basically, I find it very rich getting criticised for spending on children's services when we have a national crisis for children's services created not by us, but by you. But can I just make some more general points? The LGA, in December of last year, also released a report stating that 1 in 5 councils are looking at declaring a Section 114 notice this year. Blackpool is not one of them. Blackpool, with our deprivation and all those bad reports that you see in the media every week, Blackpool is not one of those councils. And that's testament to the brave budgeting over the last 13 years of this council, operating in the insane environment of annual settlements that have been inflicted on us. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hobson. Who's next? Councillor Boughton.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, Paul, I apologise for interrupting you in that speech. That was bad manners. In your first part of your speech there, Paul, I think you made one of the best arguments for reform of council tax I've heard in a long time. You're absolutely right. This town has got an abundance of A and B properties, and that has a detrimental effect on what we can do. That's not our fault. But one of your arguments is to build more housing in H. Where are we going to do that? This town needs more affordable housing, not expensive housing. I'm amazed that the people on that side of the chamber are blaming us for the cuts that we have to make. We've heard from both Councillor Williams and Councillor Hobson that since 2010, council budgets all over the country have been cut by significant amounts of money. And if we had the money, which is around about, as Councillor Williams said, about 23% more than what we've got now, if we had that now, we won't be here in this chamber. Let's not forget what your Prime Minister said only 2 years ago in an audience in Tunbridge Wells with Tory activists, that he wanted to take money away from poor northern areas and put it into areas like Tunbridge Wells that deserved it. Well, quite frankly, that's appalling. And that's a measure of what the Conservative government thinks about local government. You should be applauding the work that this administration is doing in defending jobs and services despite those cuts. And more importantly, the work that's been doing to redevelop and regenerate this town. It's applaudable we're doing that under that environment. Now, I've got to tell you, hope is on the horizon. We will have a general election this year, and me and millions of other people will have the opportunity to vote Labour and get rid of a Tory government. And you never know. The residents of Blackpool South might get 2 bites of the cherry because they may get a by-election as well before that.
Thank you. Was there someone else on? Councillor Taylor.
A lot of what he said was about the increase in the council tax of 4.9%, the maximum that's permitted. Every local authority, including Conservative councils, are putting it up by the same amount. Why? Because there's no option But to do that, a fifth of councils are now saying they're likely to go bust in the next 12 months. We already have a long list of them that have already said they're going into the 114 situation. I've never known anything like it. I don't think any of us, I remember a time when local authorities were in such difficulty and going bust. So all you've had to say, Paul, today, go and say to that lot in Westminster, if they're the causing the problem, because they have deliberately not supported local government over all the time they've been in, but it's got worse. We need help, and we don't need having big, these tax increases imposed on us. We shouldn't have to do that in the present situation, but we have, unfortunately. And but when I talk to people, and I do quite a bit, they understand all this because they can watch the telly, they know what's going on, and they're appalled by the situation. And we've only got to see what's happened in the recent by-election to know what they think. But when I talk to people here, they are quite optimistic about Blackpool. And they say to me, congratulations, what's happening? Because they can see all the development going on, whereas everybody else is stagnating. We're investing in the way that you've been told about tonight. And I feel very proud, really, of belonging to this council, because I think it's doing what a lot of other councils would like to do. We're actually doing it, and we've got the policies to do it. And in spite of the cuts that we've been forced into, and in spite of the restrictions on what we can do from central government, we are still getting on with creating an active, prosperous town. So, well done. And I hope very much you'll all support it. And I think you'll be doing the people of Blackpool a big favour if you supported it. And let's join together and go and see if we can get the government to see better in terms of the way they're treating us and every other local authority, Conservative, Labour or whatever, are all being treated in the same bad way. So, anyway, I hope you'll take that on board. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Hugo, did you? Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, Councillor Galley, you say that the residents of Blackpool will be horrified, and we should be horrified about what we've heard from our leader, and absolutely the contrary. You present to us Blackpool, what is it, Blackpool-nomics, where we've all heard about trust-onomics, and being from the same party, that fills me with fear and dread. And you criticise us for not giving you enough detail, yet waving your documents at us and quoting some of the savings that you'll make. It's 200,000 here, 100,000 there, 39,000 here, and 55,000 there. The 1.5 million that you quote is something that we're already on away with. You talk about trends as well. So again, here is a trend of pinching policies from the other party. So we're already looking at electricity and renewable energy, and that's where we'll be saving the larger sums of money as well. So, no, I'm afraid that doesn't fill me with any confidence whatsoever, and I absolutely support everything that our leader has said. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hugo. Councillor Flanagan, it is you.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Galley, you started your presentation today by saying you're concerned at what we're doing to people, which, again, like many of my colleagues on this side of the table, I find particularly difficult to swallow, coming from that side of the room. We talk about poor wages in the town. Poor wages. I work with the GMB trade union, a trade union that represents hundreds and thousands of frontline workers. These workers are similar to the workers here in Blackpool, frontline, NHS, cleaners, shop workers. These are saddled with in-poverty debt, in-work debt, my apologies, in-work poverty. This is because they are saddled with insecure jobs, poor legislation coming from national government, and national government that this side of the room continues to choose to champion. All this is against a backdrop of disastrous economics that have led to our workers needing food banks, rising costs with their mortgages, and quite frankly, I'm appalled. You use the word terrified, I'm terrified, and I'm sure the people of Blackpool are terrified, and the sooner we make a change in this town, the better.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further speakers? Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. I just want to give people, especially the new councillors, a bit of a history lesson. We have a population of 143,000 in this town. In the last decade of a Labour administration, you've had over £1 billion worth of investment from both capital investment and private investment. I've got the figures here that was in your nice glossy brochure that you published. A recent ONS report, seeing as we're talking about reports tonight, shows the most 20 deprived neighbourhoods in England. Blackpool has 12 of them. So you've got a decade of investment under Labour policy of £1 billion. Remember, Liverpool 1 was turned around at 900 million. But you can't turn this town around, and you keep wanting to blame national austerity. And I'll give you another fact that Councillor Williams likes to preach, but she never really goes into detail of it. Last year, when they keep going on about the figures, the tourists coming into Blackpool, 18 million, I sat there and I thought, in someone in hospitality, how can we have a town struggling with so much social deprivation when you've got 18 million visitors? So I asked the question at the last scrutiny review that I did, and it came back 16.5 million visitors that come into this town, the day trippers. You cannot build a strong economy with long-term economic growth and sustainable jobs on day trippers. So until you start addressing that, where you've got 1.5 million long stays, which bring in a lot of investment. We've just seen the Magic Convention this week, where we've had a top-line act from Vegas, which was absolutely amazing. Matt King, fantastic, well done. I will say there are some improvements when you look at Christmas by the Sea. Beckle are doing well, Bockle are doing well, but you really need to start addressing long-term stays in Blackpool if you want to change these 12 deprived neighbourhoods in the UK. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Any further speakers? Okay, I'm going to go Councillor Smith.
Sorry, drop my glasses. I put my glasses on, I'll be able to read better, won't I? Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Williams, for the excellent report you did on the success of Blackpool. We talk about borrowing and borrowing debt. I mean, at the end of the day, all borrowing we do is against a secured building, property, investment. As you well know, as you successfully said there, how well Steve Thompson's worked tirelessly for the council. Now, you can't get any money out of Steve Thompson unless it's secured against something. So all borrowing we have is secured against future investment or future borrowing. It's a bit like buying a house. No one has the money up front to buy a house, but they borrow over 25 years to pay for the house, and after a period of time, you eventually own your house, unless you move in the meantime and buy a bigger house. But it takes time to buy that long-term investment. So we borrow for the future, for the investment of the town. I came across this the other day from the House of Commons Library. Quite interesting. In 2018-19, the government debt interest on the borrowing alone was just 40 billion. In 2022 to 2023, 23-24, almost 120 billion pounds just on the interest paid by central government. The government's paying 3 times as much as interest than they were in 2018. So I don't take no confidence in what the Tory government's doing. I take confidence in what we're doing as a Labour council here in Blackpool. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Any further speakers? Councillor Michelle Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. I do think there's one thing we can all agree on both sides of the chamber, and that is however much money this council has in its budget, every penny counts. So I'd like to ask the leader, what assurance can you give us that the Integrated Care Board will meet its financial commitment to the collaborative partnership arrangements, bearing in mind that it failed in that expectation this year to the tune of £1.6 million, which it didn't pay into the Better Care Fund, as was anticipated and budgeted for by this council. Against this background, can we be assured that the council is fighting its corner in that arena? Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further speakers? Councillor Sloman?
Thank you, Mayor. I prepared a lot of notes and a lot of things that I was going to ask about from the the leader's speech actually has been covered by other speakers. I've been on a bit of a learning curve since May, since I became involved in the housing companies, and I'm seeing a lot of links between different things that matter to people and how important housing is to people. Now, it's widely reported across the country at the moment that private landlords are selling off properties at a record rate, and the mass sell-up appears to have been provoked largely by increased mortgage costs and the unpredictable economy, but as well as imminent changes in the laws that are going to protect tenants' rights. I absolutely applaud the concept and introduction of the selective licensing scheme, and it's absolutely right that we discharge our duty to the Blackpool families living in rented accommodation, that they're in safe, suitable, decent accommodation. But the selective licensing scheme has associated costs which actually could force landlords to leave the sector. That's going to diminish the amount of properties that are available in the private sector and possibly raise prices. Those costs will be passed on to tenants who are probably already struggling to pay their rent. What worries me is obviously we have duty under Section 193 of the Housing Act where people are homeless through no fault of their own, and we are seeing an increase in no-fault tenancy evictions. So I want to be sure that we've got capacity, physical capacity, maybe to look after our families while we all acknowledge the importance of social housing. And I have been blown away by the social housing that's been provided in this town. I'll be honest, both sides. But what we need to do is make sure we've got capacity to accommodate those families that might find themselves in this surge of no-fault evictions. There's the capacity there physically to care for them, that the housing budget has the ability to flex if there are going to be increased costs with that. And then another little knock-on effect from that, which is something that the leader touched on in terms of accommodation for, schools and attendance. We're going to have children that are having to move. Children that are on send, children that have school transport who are going to have to move, probably because of no fault of their own. Is there going to be the capacity within the school transport budgets, again, to flex if there's an increased demand for school transport, particularly for children that have got SEND education provision? Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sloman. Did I see Councillor Brooks?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'm not one for slogans, as you know. But I mean, Blackpoolnomics, I think we really should rebrand that as Fantasy-nomics before we go any further. And I say that for the simple reason that you forget an awful lot of stuff when you make these little links with finance and things going forward. I'll start off by talking probably about your plan that in the next 2 years people will move council tax bands because of the council tax increases and the stuff we've done on this side of the house. You can say that, but I'll also tell you that it's likely in those 2 or 3 years that pensioners and benefit claimants will be paying income tax. Because in that time scale, the fiscal drag will put every old age pensioner and every benefit claimant in line for paying income tax because of what your government are doing. So you need to look at that. You also need to look at other stuff that you're talking about in adult social care. You forget to mention that we don't have a choice over what we provide for adult social care and children's. These are statutory requirements that we have to provide. This year, we've got grant funding of £9,466, the variance. The actual requirement for that cost pressure is £17,624,000. So already, because of your government, we've got an 8.1 million deficit in those statutory requirements we don't have a choice about. So we've got to find £8 million. If we can't find it from adults, we can't find it from children, we find it from somewhere else. And we take it out of the pockets of Blackpool residents because we have to. I'm glad that Councillor Scott talked about the ICB. You're exactly right. Part of the shortfall in the budget in this year was because 1.6 billion didn't come from the ICB, which had a direct impact on our adult services budget. We've got to address that problem, and those robust conversations are going ahead. I'm aware of them, you're aware of them, I've shared them with scrutiny, that we're all on the same page on that. But it's about preventative stuff as well. It's about looking after our people and making sure they don't go into hospital and need social care later down the line. So that's my point on this. The only other thing I'll say is about the population demographic of Blackpool. The biggest export Blackpool's got is children, because children go to university and they never come back. And they never come back because there's no high-paid jobs, there's no prospects for them in Blackpool other than the tourist industry. You argued about the multiversity, you argued about the civil service building. We're talking about bringing high-paid quality jobs into the town. We're about giving people ambition to stay in Blackpool. If we get people to stay in Blackpool, they'll be here for the longer term, and that population demographic will shift. So I hear what you're saying, but I think it's fantasy-nomics rather than Blackpool-nomics.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Was there anyone else? Councillor Carl Mitchell.
Thank you, Mayor. I fully appreciate there may be issues nationwide, but whatever government's in power, they're not going to be turning on the taps for endless cash towards these debts. But it doesn't mean we can't mitigate against the impact locally. Despite an additional £4 million extra funding for children's services in the last financial year, the council overspent by a further £6 million. They're now increasing the children's budget by a further £8.2 million. We've heard time and time again that the way to reduce this cost is by reducing the numbers, but in spite of a small reduction, we're seeing our costs balloon. To get a perspective of these numbers, when you think of the 4.9% rise on council tax, that's only generating a possible £3.5 million. When you look at 2018, we had over 300 children that were looked after by Blackpool's own foster carers. Shockingly, that's now down to 184. Where did those Blackpool foster carers go? Because when you look at that, that's 120 more children now being looked after in more expensive accommodation. The average residential placement cost per child is now £290,000 a year, versus around £20,000 for an internal fostering placement, 15 times the cost. Council officers have suggested themselves that a third of children in residential homes don't require this type of care. Clearly, the foster carers are out there because the external agencies have picked them up and are looking after our children. How did we lose them, and why? And they're looking after 74 more of our children since 2018. If we invested more in our internal foster carers and provided them with adequate support, we could recruit, retain far more, moving only a fraction of the children from residential placements into foster care, into our own internal foster care. We could save millions, allowing us to freeze council tax, fill potholes and clear our streets. And that's just, as I say, from what I've seen within scrutiny. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Councillor Thomas.
I'd like to say that I appreciate the effort that you've taken to produce your own budget, and you've brought it in, even if you did waste time by printing it off. Not very carbon neutral of you. I'd say that whilst, again, I appreciate that you've submitted it, whilst it would have been better appreciated if it was submitted in plenty of time so it could have actually been scrutinised. Seemingly, it seems that you have brought your homework, despite the fact that you've then assured it that you've marked it yourself, but then you've forgotten to actually bring it to us beforehand. Thank you anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Any further speakers? Councillor Cooper.
To be honest, mine has got no facts and figures in. I actually worked in services, certainly alongside colleagues across, and I found that under Karen Smith and certainly under Vicky Gent now, their way of working has always been innovative. Indeed, the excuse always was, the less money there was, the more creative services had to be. I know that Councillor Hobson outlined that many things were going on already in the pipeline. And these innovative services certainly prove dividends. But you will know more than I do, but it was something that I'd heard of. And I know that some services, I'll use the ARC just as an example. When I worked in services, it was assessment and rehabilitation of elderly people who was coming out of hospital, a means of a stepping stone to getting home. I think probably now they have many people in with multiple needs, quite profound needs, meaning my understanding that many people from our older population are now locked in, in hospital. They don't want to be in hospital. The hospitals don't want them. They're not in need of medical intervention. They're in need of social, getting them back into their own homes. And I'd heard, you may already know, I'd heard about quite an innovative scheme. I believe it was in Manchester. And what it was almost, I would say, almost on the shared lives approach, whereby families were recruited and checked, and an older person coming out of hospital was actually placed within a family home, whereby they were helped with their mobility, they were helped making meals, and they had companionship. And it was for us a given amount of time, perhaps 2-3 weeks, I wasn't sure. But I was only bringing it up because I believe it was, I do not know how much it costs to keep a person in a hospital bed for a week. And I also know that many times it becomes a bit of a revolving door with elderly people sadly returning to hospital. And my understanding was that they had almost now become, I would say, almost a shared lives. And as that person moves back into their own homes, the family that they had stayed with actually helped them and became a bit of a companion and moved away. I appreciate that that many of our managers are doing great innovative things. I just wanted to bring it up as an example of what others are doing, and I thought it was a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Any further speakers? No? In that case, over to Councillor Williams for the right to reply.
Thank you. My notes are a bit all over the place, and a lot of what I was going to say has already been covered. I'll try and stick to the sort of the main sort of areas and who asked and respond to who spoke. In relation to the council tax, I'm glad you seem to be agreeing that your government needs to really sort out council tax and that it's a completely defunct system. I'm not really sure how it would work. It seems to be on the basis that you'd knock small houses down and build big ones. I don't really understand how that you do that. And obviously the rateable system is to be, is not within our remit. That's down to the government to sort that out. Where were we next? We went to borrowing, didn't we? All of our borrowing, 99%, as Councillor Smith has talked about, is bricks and mortar. That is all fully costed and secured. It has to wash its face. And again, because Steve Thompson wouldn't let any of his colleagues get away with anything. So I'm not sure what you're kind of implying. Do you not think, with the 200 million civil service hub, do you not think the DWP are good for it? All of that money is secured and so that there is as little as risk absolutely as possible. And I do find it a little bit rich in that talking about the cost of borrowing. On the government figures, the amount is slightly over the medium, the average, but we are below the average in terms of cost. And you'll forgive me if I don't really take a lot of advice from someone who is a member of the Conservative Party. The Conservative government have increased the amount of their borrowing, the interest alone, £115 billion. I mean, it is just a phenomenal amount. And what has that been in? Our borrowing is bricks and mortar and regenerating this town. The government money, what's it gone on? Possibly HS2, well, look where that ended up. An absolute disgrace. So, where were... I apologise, my notes are all a bit skitty-scatty. Councillor Hobson absolutely set out those issues in relation to children's social care. In relation to foster care, we've just launched a new, earlier this year, the end of last year. We absolutely understand that children need to be you know, with families. There is, and that's what we will aim to do. And the amount of work that has gone into that fostering scheme is phenomenal. And I'm sure you can cover that in scrutiny. Adult social care, I'd like to add to the comments that are made, that, and particularly around this issue of cost of care, because of the chronic underfunding of the NHS, there's further additional costs that fall on us. People are being delayed who can't have their knee or their other operations or surgery. They're iller before they get at hospital. Where does that vulnerability, who does that have to be supported by? By the council. And when they come out of hospital and then they're coming out too early because they need to free up bed spaces, who again? It's the council. So this isn't just about underfunding of this council, it's about underfunding of...
Sorry, Councillor Williams.
Okay, sorry. I was just getting...
Gonna have to stop you there.
Yeah?
3 minutes to respond.
Sorry.
Okay. She was just getting into her stride there. Sorry about that. Okay, so this needs to be another recorded vote. Over to you, Minister.
Thank you, Mayor. There's a recorded vote on the motion in the name of Councillor Lynn Williams. Please could members indicate their answer with either yes, no or abstain. Councillor Baker? No. Councillor Bamborough? Yes. Councillor Benson?
Yes.
Councillor Boughton?
Yes.
Councillor Neil Brooks?
Yes.
Councillor Pam Brooks? Yes. Councillor Sean Brooks?
Yes.
Councillor Badess?
Yes.
Councillor Cartmel?
Yes.
Councillor Cooper? Councillor Critchley? Councillor Ellison? Councillor Farrell? Yes. Councillor Flanagan?
Yes.
Councillor Galley?
No.
Councillor Hobson?
Yes.
Councillor Hoyle?
Yes.
Councillor Hugo?
Yes.
Councillor Humphreys?
Yes.
Councillor Hunter?
Yes.
Councillor Jackson?
Yes.
Councillor Jones?
Yes.
Councillor Marshall?
Yes.
Councillor Carl Mitchell?
No.
Councillor Diane Mitchell? Councillor Roberts?
No.
Councillor Rowe?
Yes.
Councillor Danny Scott?
No.
Councillor Michelle Scott? Councillor Sloman?
No.
Councillor Mark Smith?
Yes.
Councillor Taylor?
No.
Councillor Thomas?
Yes.
Councillor Walsh?
No.
Councillor Warren?
No.
Councillor Williams?
Yes.
Councillor Wilshaw?
No.
Mayor?
Yes.
Members have voted as follows: 25 for the motion, 13 against.
So that motion is carried. So I've had a request for a very short break. So I know we've still got a few things to go through. So can we be back in our seats by 8:15, please? Thank you. Please be seated. Okay, so we're on to agenda item typical. On to agenda item 5, which is the capital strategy 24-25 to 26-27. And it's over to Councillor Williams again.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, happy to recommend agenda item 5, capital strategy, to consider the recommendations of the executive from its meeting the 5th of February 2024 on the capital strategy for 24-25 to 26-27 and its complementary document, the property investment strategy for 24-25. Thank you.
Happy to second that.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Any other councillors to speak? I know without looking it's going to be Councillor Galley.
This is like the old days, isn't it, when I first started? I used to have a reputation for talking a lot when I first became a councillor. Thank you, Mayor. Obviously, we note the report. There is some interesting reading in there, not so much of what's in it, but what isn't in it. We've talked about tonight council tax base, for example. We know there are large areas of the town that are suffering huge deprivation issues. We know that there are huge parts of the town like Bond Street and so forth, parts of Living Road, parts of Central Drive, and I don't mean the developing bit that you've got a plan for, but it feels there's a real missed opportunity here, especially when we see on page 199 of the report, where it says as of the 31st of March, the council is estimated to underborrow by approximately 121 million. Now, that's fine in a time if our strategy is to be prudent, Mayor. But if our strategy is to invest and grow the economy, is that what the strategy is trying to define, then why are those things not in there? Why is it not trying to address some of those challenges that I've just mentioned? And why is it not looking to say, where does this fit with private investors as well? So it's not so much what's in it, it's also what's missing from it. And for that reason, we won't be supporting it, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Galley. Any further speakers? Councillor Smith?
Sorry, thank you. I'm just a bit confused because Councillor Galley raised a little about our debt interest, and now we're saying that we should borrow more money. So I'm a bit confused on where he's coming from. Should we borrow more money to invest or not borrow money to reduce down our interest borrowing? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Anyone else? No? In that case, over to you, Councillor Williams.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Smith. Point I was going to make as well. Master plans, private investment, Holiday Inn, others coming along, cinema, different investments, Pride of Place, business in the community, worked incredibly closely with. I don't accept those points. And again, I think I am a bit like a broken record. Those challenges of that we know that our people have challenges. We know the inner wards working towards that, all of the policies that we have. And if people are struggling or are in difficulties, it's because of the Conservative government who have been running this country since 2010, and very soon may that come to an end. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. So we have council to vote on the motion. Those for? Those against? Any abstentions? No, in that case, motion is carried. Then we have capital programme 24-25 to 26-27. Over to you again, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, to consider recommendations of the executive from its meeting of the 5th of February 2024 on the 24-25, 25-26 and 26-27 capital programmes. Thank you.
Seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Any other councillors to speak? Councillor Galley.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. A little bit concerned, page 204, it is proposed that the council use some non-ring-fence capital grants in future for its corporate priorities, Mayor. For me, this starts to feel like we're starting to capitalise some of our capital work and the sort of programme that we've seen elsewhere of authorities that have gone down the 114 route, not by choice but by necessity. Why is that significant, Mayor? Because we've always thought of such a route that we start to use investment in our revenue as the similarity of propping up, borrowing from your mortgage to support your lifestyle. So I'm a bit concerned that we started to, as a strategy, move in that direction. You would also expect communications and regeneration to be much higher. A lot of these figures, Mayor, are actually covered by John Blackledge's team in coastal protection schemes. You would naturally think, whilst the grant funding is there in certain areas, why is it not in this report, in those points? And again, as ever, it doesn't address how are we going to address those council tax flaws that we've identified. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Galley. Any further speakers? No. Councillor Williams?
Yeah, yes, thank you, Mayor. I don't think, Councillor Galley, that you genuinely believe that the Director of Finance would allow that policy or that scheme to infiltrate or to take hold or to happen. Absolute nonsense. I'm sorry, I didn't catch the end bit, but I think it was about council tax bases again, which I think I've already dealt with in the previous point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. So, Council to vote on the motion. Those for? Those against? Any abstentions? No, in that case, the motion is carried. Now we have Treasury Management Strategy. Over to Councillor Williams again.
Thank you, Mayor. To consider the recommendation of the Executive from its meeting on the 5th of February 2024 to Council on the Treasury Management Strategy 24-25. Thank you.
I bet you have, Councillor Taylor. Anyone to speak? Councillor Galley.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, obviously I'm referenced borrowings and so forth earlier, short-term and long-term, so I won't repeat that again, Mayor. However, I still feel we do need to answer the question around our strategy. It's okay constantly referring, well, Steve Thompson says it's okay. Well, actually, if it goes wrong, you're responsible. So you need to actually be able to define it without saying Steve Thompson said it's okay. So why do we have this strategy about a 50-50 split now, but want to increase short-term borrowings as a greater amount in the future, when in the past when interest rates were lower, we still had higher amounts of short-term borrowings? I don't understand the strategy. So if the leader could explain it and not just constantly say Steve Thompson says it's okay, that would be great. And as I've said before, our debt is just too high. And yes, whilst I say, Councillor Smith, that our debt is too high, it is. There's no doubt about it. But if a great scheme comes along and says you can get this return and you can justify it, because I tell you what, every time any member, Labour or Conservative, asks a question about our borrowing schemes, they get told one thing and one thing only. It is commercially confidential. So how do we know? That's why we have to check. We have to hold you to account. That's our job. And we can't constantly pass that over to our Section 155 officer and say it's his job. It's yours.
Thank you, Councillor Galley. Any further speakers? No, Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Just the last point, Councillor Galley, I'm a bit confused because you're saying that there's been massive transparency and you've no issues and you've had all the information that you want. So I don't really understand why you're now saying that we're saying everything's commercially confidential, because you've had transparency. You've had all the information that you wanted and you've asked for. So the issue around the 50-50, yes, we want to move to 50-50, and it isn't 50-50 at the minute because the mess that your government have made of this country, and in terms of the interest rates, might go down. We're not going to tie everything up to a long term when the rates will fall. And that's what we've done that in the past. We've secured that borrowing when we thought that the rates were going. So it is monitored and a decision will be made. The absolute aim is to get to 50-50, but we continue to watch the interest rates to enable us to save money and not make a rash decision. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. In that case, we move to the vote. Those for the motion? Those against? Any abstentions? No, in that case, the motion is carried. And that is the end of the business for tonight. Thank you all for attending.